So the Democrats have adopted child mutilation disguised as trans compassion as one of the many concerning pillars of their party. Leading that charge at the state level are governors like Gavin Newsom, of course, but also none other than Tim Walz of Minnesota. Well, my next guest is sounding the alarm on this issue and Tim Walz's advocacy for it, and not only for encouraging minor gender confusion, but also concealing that confusion from parents. Joining me now is Courage is a Habit President, Alvin Lui. Alvin, it's great to have you. This is such an important issue. A lot of parents out there, this is going to be an election issue for them. And a lot of parents are not familiar with Tim Walz and his agenda in Minnesota and what he might bring to a Harris-Walz administration on this issue. What have you found out that parents need to know?
Lovely to see you again, Tomi. Yeah, so most parents and Americans don't know that there's such a thing as a transgender trafficking bill. And in Minnesota, it's House File HF 146. And a transgender trafficking bill basically says that if a child from another state, let's say if you live in Texas or Indiana, Florida, wherever, and you go over to Minnesota, a child can go over to Minnesota, cross state lines, any adult can take the child. This is the important piece here. Any adult can take the child, and if the child claims that the parents does not want him or her to get the irreversible transgender drugs or the mutilation surgeries, the state of Minnesota can take that child and they will not reunite them with the parents, even if the parents come looking for them. They will put them in foster care, and then at that point, they will use taxpayer-funded Medicaid to pay for the drugs and the surgeries. Furthermore, these transgender trafficking bills, if let's say a parent's a divorce, let's say you have one parent that's a full custody, the other parent that doesn't, the parent that doesn't have the full custody can bring the child over to that state, and the parent with the full custody can try to say, hey, this is kidnapping, I want my child back, and the state of Minnesota will not honor the custody agreement from the home state. And that's what Walz signed in 2023. He signed it in early 2023, and that's what a transgender trafficking bill is.
It's so wild to me because they call this, trans friendly or trans refuge as how they like to characterize it, as some kind of a compassionate thing that they're taking care of trans youth. And the narrative that they spin, at least that I've heard them spin, and it's somewhat convincing if you're unfamiliar, is that, these kids are being thrown out of their houses, and these trans kids, they have nowhere to go. And if you are thrown out of your house, or if your parents are discriminating against you, we will take care of you because we are compassionate. But what it really is it's completely refuting parental rights. And it's saying that a kid who is gender confused, is a minor, gender confused minor, can just go to another state and have that state's government play parent and take the place of a parent, and also be part of an irreversible change in somebody's life, somebody that shouldn't be making these kind of decisions at that age. And Tim Walz signed this in 2023. That to me is so wild. When you talk to parents and you talk to those that are concerned about this, are they familiar that this is part of Tim Walz's agenda?
They're not. Most parents, most Americans don't even know what a transgender trafficking bill is. But see, this all stems from schools. This idea that parents are abusive and unsafe. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a trans child. So there's no trans child to beat. There's no trans child to throw out. That's a social contagion created in government K through 12. And this idea that parents are unsafe and abusive, and we need to save these children from their parents, started with school counselors in K through 12. And they're doing it through a mental health Trojan horse called social emotional learning. And every school has it. Doesn't matter if you're a red or blue state. And I want to make that very clear. If you live in a red state, it doesn't exempt you from it at all. And so it's social emotional learning, it's mental health, school counselors, they push this social contagion on children. And then, of course, when most parents are saying, hey, my child's not born in the wrong body. What the hell is that? That's ridiculous. Then they say parents are unsafe and abusive. So the logical next step, of course, if you can see that cultural change, which they've done now for 8 to 10 years in government K through 12 with the transgender ideology, the next logical step, of course, the state has to protect these kids from these bigoted and transphobic parents from another state. And so one of the things that we really teach parents to fight this, and you alluded to this a second ago, is we teach them a concept called language contamination. So very easily, this is how you remember it. Language contamination is when they use your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. So it doesn't matter if it's empathy or compassion or safety. They use your vocabulary, not your dictionary. So that when they say empathy, you and I and everybody else might think, oh, you're teaching a child to think about someone else before themselves, put themselves in their shoes. They're teaching girls that they have to have empathy for a man that walks into the bathroom. The empathy always goes to the mentally ill man. The empathy always goes to the person who's doing the attacking. So that's what the transgender cult does. They really only have two powers. I always say they only have two things. And if you beat these two things, they have no power. The first one is language contamination, which is what I just mentioned. The second is they weaponize your empathy. They weaponize your kindness.
Yeah. And also cancel culture. They also make people fearful to speak out against it because they don't want to be labeled a transphobe or a homophobe or some kind of a phobe. But you brought up, a really good point that I hope that parents understand. And that's that being in a red state or a conservative state or a conservative county or a conservative city does not protect you from this. And I'll actually put an example to that. I live in Tennessee. I live in Brentwood, Tennessee. I live in Williamson County, which is a conservative county, obviously here in deep red Tennessee. And, I have people in my neighborhood that are in early years of high school and ask them, hey, do you have any they, thems in your class? And they go, oh, just a few. And I'm thinking, a few? I mean, I'm only 32, but I never had a they, them in my classroom. I didn't know what the hell a they, them was. I thought it was just incorrect grammar and speaking form. But they also, I've had parents say, listen, my kids go to school in Williamson County, deep red county, and they are taught that you can choose your gender. And they come home being like, hey, can I really choose my gender? I mean, this is happening nationwide, obviously much worse in states like California and thanks to Tim Walz, Minnesota. But what can parents do if they want to fight back against something like this?
The main thing for parents is to opt them out of meeting with school counselors. And so if you go to courageisahabit.org and click on school counselors, there are 6 tools in there, but it doesn't matter which tool you click on. Each of those tools at the end has an opt-out form. So it's courageisahabit.org and school counselors. And it's really important that parents make sure that their school counselors do not meet with their child in any way, shape, or form, formally or informally, without their consent and without their presence. Because if you think about it, parents, before they take them to a violin class or a swim class, they have all these, they do a review, they get recommendations and referrals. But these mental midgets that are school counselors, these essentially just very insufferable, woke counselors, they're trained as missionaries, and their mission is your children. So there's zero reason why any government employee should be meeting with your child, talking about very personal things, sexual things, and family values, things like that. So use that opt-out form. You fill out 1 per child every year. And we encourage every parent, especially now that school started, is perfect, submit that opt-out form. And one of the recommendations that we have is get 3 or 4 other parents together and submit it. Yeah. Because if you do that, it's a lot harder for them to gaslight you if you have 4 or 5 other parents to do it. Obviously, the more the better. But get other parents, submit these opt-out forms. And one other tip I can give that's super effective, now I know not every parent can afford it, especially with this Biden economy, is a lot of parents don't know that you can actually have an attorney represent your child. Not you, but your child. So all you have to do is take our opt-out form, which is written by an attorney, pay the $250 an hour or whatever it is for the attorney, have them send it to the school and say, I'm representing Joseph Williams here. And now the schools are going, I'm getting an opt-out form from an attorney. That weighs a lot more to the school's attorney. The school's attorney is going to go, we don't want that smoke. Just don't bother that kid.
Wow. I mean, that's a hefty price tag. I'm not sure how many average Americans can afford that. I think if they could afford that, they might actually just pull their kid into some kind of a private learning. But you know what? It's happening at private schools too. So I don't want people to think that private schools are immune from all of this, because they certainly are not. It's so wild to me too, because again, I've said before, I'm 32. I'm not that old in the scheme of things. When I had a guidance counselor in school, they were telling me like what math class I should take, or how I should arrange my schedule for the best possibility for me and for college. They never were talking to me about like who I fancy or what kind of gender I think I am. I mean, this to me is so bizarre that this is actually happening at the rate that it's happening, and it is so common, and it is commonplace now. It's normal now for these discussions to be happening. That's weird. When we talk about, go ahead.
No, I'm saying so the school counselors started to change around 2014. And so about 10 years ago. So when you were going to school, they were still called guidance counselors. And that changed under the Obama administration. And so in 2014, they changed those guidance counselors to school counselors. And they called basically now they're just social agents of change.
Social agents of change.
That's what they call
themselves. That's just what we need to spend our tax dollars on. Social agents of change.
Mao would be proud.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, listen, this has been incremental, as you mentioned, from the Obama administration till now, and it's just getting progressively worse. Back in 2014, if you were to explain to people what is going on now, they would be like, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. They're not going to change my kid's gender and traffic them to another state to get a life-changing surgery." Now here we are, a very real thing. You mentioned the Obama administration. All right, well, now we have a potential Harris-Walz administration. What do you think that would look like on a national level?
Well, we already saw a glimpse of that with the Title IX. And I know the Supreme Court halted it, but it's not what people think. They just stopped it. It doesn't mean that they banned it. Okay, so I want everyone to understand that. But that Title IX change was a glimpse of what happens if you get a Harris-Walz administration. What they're going to do is they're going to make it mandated. They're going to mandate every school on a federal level to allow boys and girls bathroom, boys and girls sports, forcing pronouns. They're going to punish children if you don't use the right pronouns. They're going to mandate a very heavy, they call it comprehensive sex education, but really it should be pornographic sex education because that's really what it is. So that's what's going to look like that's at the beginning. That's the bare minimum. If we get that administration within the first year, they will pass federal bills to force all schools in all states. So even if you live in a blue state and you have a couple of good school boards that you flipped and they're trying to get this out, they're going to force them to do it. They're going to hold and then private schools, and that's taken grants. Private schools have taken any kind of federal funding, any kind of vouchers, any of those things. They will also be forced to do it. That's what's going to happen. I promise you, that's what's going to happen within the first year if they get into office.
It's so important for parents to understand because, there are a lot of parents out there that don't like politics. They don't like to focus on politics. They care about what happens in their community and they care what happens at their kid's school. But they look at all this politics stuff and they say, it doesn't really apply to me and I live in such and such state, or I'm rich and I send my kid to private school, so this won't impact me. But what you're saying is so important for them to understand because it very well could impact them, likely will impact them. That's going to be a day one agenda item. We know Kamala Harris is a radical. We know Tim Walz is a radical. I mean, it goes far beyond just tampons in the boys' bathroom. I mean, this is life-changing stuff. In the couple minutes that I have left with you, please tell me, you mentioned the resource on Courage is a Habit about the opt-out form, so important for people to understand. But what other resources does your organization offer for parents that are so confused by all of this? They don't even know what a they, them is. Where do they go to find out more?
Parents have to understand that if you don't care about politics, but politics care about your children. And we often say that if you don't stand up for your children today, they will live on their knees tomorrow. So if you're worried about being doxxed and called a name, imagine when this keeps going forward, what kind of world is your children going to live in? If you're worried about not putting a pronoun in your corporate email today, imagine what your children are going to go through. And so at Courage is a Habit, we create these beautiful, easy to understand tools. More importantly, we distill down these tools so that you, a parent that basically doesn't even have 2 hours to themselves, much less trying to figure this out, we give you these tools to help you understand what's happening in school, social emotional learning, the trans ideology, what restorative justice is, those type of things. So if you go to courageisahabit.org, all these tools are made with you in mind. It's not made with someone like Tomi in mind, where she lives on this every day, or myself. It's made for you who have a regular job, who have a regular life. And so that's what these tools are for. It's easy to understand. But very key, we also give you a call to action. Every tool at the end has a call to action, because we don't just want to give you this outrage and no outlet, because that creates that hopelessness. And we don't want you to feel hopeless, because you're not, and you're not helpless. And so that's what we really want you to do. And just go and download that. You can follow us on our socials. On X or Instagram, Facebook is at Courage Habit. And we are a nonprofit, so every support you give us, every time you share a tool, besides we just got a new shop here. And so every time you go buy buy one of our items and everything, it really just goes right back to our fight. And so we certainly appreciate the love and trust, and we appreciate people like you that gives me a few minutes to talk about this.
No, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And the tools are so important because it's one thing to be outraged by it. It's another thing to go ahead and make a step, at least to protect your own kids and your own family. I mean, that opt-out form is so important. If that's just the littlest thing that you can do, it's still something, and it still at least will protect your kids. We want to protect everybody's kids from, being part of this trans refuge, they, them, rainbow mafia cult society. So good for you guys. I'm obviously going to share in this episode where parents can find you and your resources and your tools that you guys have curated for them. Thanks so much, Alvin, as always, for bringing us the truth, for spelling this out for us. Courage is a habit, and we appreciate you for having the courage.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you as always. All right, folks, that does it for this very important episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless, directed especially at the parents out there. School is starting. Do not let your kid become a they, them without your knowledge. Make sure you catch full episodes of this show on Fox Nation at your leisure. Also, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I will be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.